Natal Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi has raised concern following mass resignations within the Special Task Force. He believes many are opting to move to private security companies instead. Criminal law expert Ian Allis joins us now for more on this trend that is emerging. Ian, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. Are you surprised at all that while the police service is inundated with crime that is rising in many parts of South Africa, there are elite police officers, police members who've been trained with a special task force who are possibly leaving?
Good evening, Tabon. Good evening to the viewers. Unfortunately, it's not surprising. The police as it is already, they're under-resourced, unmotivated, and overburdened. The problem that's actually starting to happen is crime is on the increase, but the amount getting paid to the police and the training of police officers is going down. So obviously, a lot of these people who are elite and well-trained individuals in police detective work will obviously look at a greener pasture, especially when they're not getting incentivized and not getting paid to the extent that they could in the private sector, dealing with A security, B private investigation based work, and the like. There's less work and more money available than where there's less money and more work in the police force.
Yeah. So you're saying the driving factor is just purely financial, it's purely an economic decision. Why is the commissioner suspect that there is something a little bit more sinister that is going on, i.e. the dismantling of the state capacity deliberately?
Well, let me put it in this way as well. It's not necessarily just the financial, but that's a major part of it. Secondly, it's under-resourced as well. And thirdly, it's dangerous out there being a police official, and especially with the stances that are going to be taken, that they're looking at as far as justifiable defenses and whether or not justifiable force while arresting and apprehending suspects as well. And ultimately, there's also the element of corruption that's starting to creep in, where a lot of people don't trust their brother officers. It is so many different factors, and ultimately, it's creating a perfect storm. If one could look at it, there's under resources, there's high amounts of work, the stress levels that the police are fighting, and these are elite, well-trained police officers who've been doing this for years, and their lives are on the line, and they've got very little support to actually work with. The criminals are better armed than the police are.
Do security guards, are you saying, do they earn, especially at that level, I suppose, where they would be guarding wealthy people with more things to protect, earn a whole lot more than what they're earning as police officers?
Let me put it to you this way: one mustn't get their appointments confused with, and you say the security industry, with the common varieties sitting outside of the bank, keeping an eye on things. This is elite security. There's bodyguarding involved. There's a lot of management with regards from also companies to avoid cash in transit, extra security depots being opened up. So people are almost investing. A lot of companies are investing in their own private police force. So when the term security is used, it's a little bit too loose a term. It gives a little bit of an underestimate of what it actually is. These guys are forming private elite crime fighting organizations. That is basically what it is there for, what they're actually there being hired for, and that is what these security firms are. They're acting as consultants and directors and operatives in almost a private police force capacity.
Yeah, there's an argument though that says the elite security guards, as you put them, don't necessarily make communities safer. In fact, what ends up happening, we have an increase of guns and guards who are largely unregulated.
One must also then take a look, is a lot of those guards who are there's a lot of unregistered security personnel, which in the private security industry is governed and regulated by SERA. Now, that's also, if they're a regulatory body, they must also govern who their members are and what the training is. The problem comes is when you've got poor trained guards who have been escalated in their capacity. They don't really know how to handle guns. They don't really know how to handle situations. They're not properly trained. So one must consider exactly where these guys are actually fitting in, and at the capacity and the level that they're fitting in. You're not going to sit and take a captain out of the police force and then put him outside as a glorified doorman and not thinking that he knows how to handle a gun and a firearm. He is going to be specifically overseen. And the problem is what they're trying to do is improve the level of the private security guards, even at the lower level, for their own protection, because there's no trust in the police being able to do it.
So 2022 numbers were saying there are 2.2 million registered security guards. Of those, 586,000 would have been actively employed, compared to 140,000 police officers who are in the service. Does that worry you? What will be the impact of that when we are having a country with 4 times more security guards than we have police officers?
The problem also comes is that you've got a lot of security guards who are not competent in making the police force. So private security isn't automatically the way to go when you look at a certain lower level of guard, where they basically glorified doormen. The danger comes is that there's a middle level where these guys are not well enough trained to join, cannot go ahead and make the grade to be police officers, but they still want to enter into security, and they get their jobs that way. The thing is that at the present moment, our private security, and that's because of so many of the security firms popping up and registration becoming more frequent, because people see it as a profitable line of business, because very simply the police, there's no confidence in our police force. And so there are worrying facts about that, because people are not entering into the public service realm because they're afraid they're not going to get guns, they're not going to be safe, they're going to be placed in highly frightening situations, not getting the training, not getting the support, and you might have your fellow officer who might be on the take. There's not a whole lot of incentives for one to go ahead to want to actually join the police force at this juncture.
There is also a question of overstepping in the functional areas of policing. How often do you see that happening?
There's always been, let's call a spade a shovel, there's always been instances of police brutality and the police going ahead and overstepping the boundary. You've got certain different factors. You've got certain police officers who are heavy-handed and believe in taking the bullying tactic. You also end up having corrupt officers, which place other parties in jeopardy, and ill-equipped and incompetent police as well. Certain times, especially coming in at the starting level, the fact remains is that for a police force to operate optimally, there needs to be training. The biggest danger with all these guys leaving the force is that there's been a lot of money spent in investment training these police, and now that's lost to the public. So to retrain new officers takes time, it takes effort, and it takes these people with their skill level to hand over the baton to the younger group coming through, which is not happening.
So you don't believe, maybe by any chance, that there is a concerted effort of dismantling the state capacity? I mean, the commissioner seems to be concerned about that, saying, why go to such length of dismantling the capacity of state just to guard a few wealthy people with some few items? There is a sense that he says there is another sinister reason that is behind that, and he's asked those in power high up to have a look at this.
I'm sorry, but the commissioners also must look at the country as a whole. Realistically, All the way up from the ministry downwards, there's problems with regards with our police force. Is when you've got your minister of police sitting and rather picking fights in town halls, then addressing real issues in certain regards about crime and the statistics in this country. It's not about going ahead and dismantling the force. It's basically people are getting tired of this, and there's no conspiracy theory. The police force is failing. There's no resources. A lot of our police officials are not up to scratch, and a lot of guys have been getting promotions rather through connections rather than through merit. There's a ceiling in regards to the police force, and people are going to go ahead, and once they hit that ceiling, they're out of there. It's not a conspiracy. It's a fact of life, and if the commissioner doesn't start training and looking at things properly, then they're going to have to go ahead and there's going to be bigger problems. The fact is that is a tax responsibility. Is an investment in the police force, but people are having to invest in their own private security and private security firms where there's more lucrative contracts coming out. That's the reality, not because there's a conspiracy to go ahead and undermine the police force. The incompetence and certain times the corruption coming out of the police force is what's undermining the police force.
Yeah. How do you then, I mean, currently the debate is that security company or officers are hired in a private security firm are as good as myself, literally, in terms of the power that they have. They are not peace officers, and so they have really don't have real authority. But they are carrying themselves out as if they do have that authority. How do we make that kind of partnership a little bit more valuable?
The problem is that you've got a lot of the security firms, and this is why they're also looking at bringing in guys who actually know the role. Unfortunately, and this is the other side of the argument. Things are not always greener on the other side. The fact is that there are certain privileges as officers that one in actual fact has. They lose those privileges. It's citizen arrest. It's not genuine arrest. They can't arrest people. They can't really throw people in aside from in the van and take them to the police station. But what you also going to see from this type of thing is they're still allowed to carry weapons. And they are not subject to whether it's reasonable force from a police official. If they get shot at, they will open fire, and there's more justifiable aspects from a safety point of view. That's where the difference is actually coming. They're not really worried about the legal implications of arresting people. They're more interested in now, how do you keep the client safe one way or another? And certain times you are going to find there is going to be an escalation in, one could go ahead and say, almost a potential vigilante type of violence, or where these guys are going to just use excessive force all the time if they're given an opportunity to. So there's a swings and roundabouts aspect to it. They don't have the power, but yet at the moment the police seem to be losing more and more of their power anyway.
Ian Allis, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on.